Hello, welcome to the Horti-Culturalists. I am Matthew Lucas.
And I'm Stephen Ryan, and we post a video every week. So why not press subscribe and the alert button so that you'll keep up with us on what we're doing week by week.
Yes, and if you've got a burning horticultural question for Stephen, do put it in the comments below with where you're from in the world, and you will try and answer it in 60 seconds on Monday.
I'll do my very best.
And any plants that we might mention in this video are in the text below, and if you can't see that, just click read more and it will all ping out before you.
Yes. So today
I am smelling the smells of Australia, Stephen.
Yes, the eucalyptus is strong in the air, as you can see by this one right here. We are in the Melton Botanic Gardens, which is a town on the western side of Melbourne, at their fantastic botanic gardens, and we're going to have a look around the gardens. We're going to talk to John Bentley, who's the president of the Friends group here at Melton, and look at some of the amazing things they're doing in this garden.
And there are a few interesting things about this garden. The first thing is it's in a dry Mediterranean microclimate in Victoria. So everything here is dry climate and there's no watering. First interesting thing. The second thing, which I find fascinating, is that this was a ground up, if you pardon the pun, botanic garden. So it was, and it is, the vision of the local residents, because there's really no state or official funding for it. It was all about the Friends organisation.
Yes, and they've done a remarkable job, not only in raising money, but also in raising grants and other things, and been very efficient at getting on side with local businesses who've come to the party with all sorts of product and money.
And all the maintenance, everything is volunteered, so it's quite an extraordinary setup.
Yeah, so let's go and meet John.
Let's.
Well, hello John, it's nice to see you again. John Bentley, Friends of the Botanic Gardens at Melton, president. So we have the the titular head, so to speak. Yes. So thank you for allowing us to come down and do some filming in the gardens, and I guess we need to find out a little bit about it. So to start with, the most obvious thing to ask is, when did it start?
The Botanic Garden itself, we started our first plantings in 2008.
So it's not that far back.
No, but we started planning and trying to initiate a botanic garden in Melton back in 2003, and this year's the 20th anniversary of the Friends.
Oh, well, there we go. How fortuitous.
So paint the picture for the viewers. What was here originally when you first got the plot?
This is like a lot of Melton, a big flat open paddock full of carpet weed or Grevillea pubescens.
Oh dear, doesn't sound auspicious.
No.
Well, it was South African.
Yeah, yes.
So an exotic introduced species. So I guess Stephen's told me a bit about the structure of the garden, in that it's unique, in that it is managed, run, funded by the Friends.
To a large extent, yes. It was initiative from the community. It is on council land, and it's about 27 hectares. It has a 3-hectare water body and Ryan's Creek running through it. So they were some of the things that we said to council. This is the bit of land that we would like to build a botanic garden on. After they said they weren't going to pay for it.
But they generously gave you the land.
Yes.
And it's got
they
water.
still own it.
Yeah.
So we do have an agreement with council about what we can do and what they do.
All right, so the other question I'd like to ask is, it's basically, a lot of the garden is taken over by Australian native plant collections, but there are other areas of the world that are included as well. So what was the sort of thoughts behind what sort of groups of plants you're going to include?
So when we did the concept planning in 2006, we engaged Rob Small, who was high up in World Parks and Gardens.
Right.
We got a grant to do that, and he worked with us, and people didn't just want an Australian garden in our community consultations. We, in the end, came to, let's have plants that a xerophyte theme or a low water use theme that come from similar climatic areas to Melton. So we picked on South Africa, California, Central South America, Mediterranean region, and Australian natives, West Australian, South Australian, a wide range of dryland eucalypts. But we building now our extensive Californian Central South American garden, and in 2015 we started this. What's behind us is the Southern African garden,
which is looking splendid.
We're also loving the red painted tree there. What's the story with that?
It was an old sugar gum that died. We had a trivia night, we got some money, and we said, what can we do with the money? And we said, how about painting the tree aloe red to reflect the colours in this part of the Southern African garden?
Man after my own heart. I paint a lot of things in my garden as well.
We have a scandalous episode about Miscanthus dulaxii.
Yes, my red miscanthus grass. So I'm very much in favour of that tree.
Now, I guess, obviously, it's a dry climate, Mediterranean climate, but there is a body of water. So tell us about that beautiful small lake and the amazing gums that are around there, because we'll go and have a look later on.
So that was one of the reasons why we said to council we would like this. It's close to the town centre.
Yeah, so people can walk in.
But the body of water itself, you might hear in the background the freeway noise. So when the freeway was constructed in the late 70s, the lake was constructed as well.
Oh.
So we got overhead photos from the 1970s where that was just farmland.
Oh.
And the farmers owned the freeway area and everything. So it was made by council, but it's a 3-hectare body of water that has lots of bird life, and we've got a bird sanctuary island that we've been doing up in the middle. So one day if you come over on the boat,
can we
take you around that? Yes.
Sounds fun. You've got bodies of water, you've got an ephemeral stream. The whole site though was fairly level, wasn't it, basically?
It is fairly level. We have built a 6-metre hill for the Californian Central South American garden.
Yeah, so you've brought in a lot of soil, fill, whatever.
Well, we talked to the industrial estate going over there and said, could you bring me some soil over, please?
So when they're excavating,
tons of it just came across.
We've heard that story before.
Yeah.
Now, back to the eucalypts by the small lake there. So how old are they?
They're probably over 200 years old. In fact, one of the old, because when they flooded the lake, there were old trees running along Ryan's Creek that flows through there.
Ryan's Creek?
Yeah, nothing to do with me, unfortunately.
So some Aboriginal people have said to me, they believe one of those trees was a birthing tree. So there is special Aboriginal significance. Just up the road there, one of the last corroborees was held. There is a lot of significance here.
Now that's something you haven't mentioned though, because you also have a connection with the indigenous people here with some of your planting as well.
And they built a ceremonial circle here, so they do dancing, boy to man ceremonies and things like that. Unfortunately, Melton, about 11 kilometres or 12 kilometres that way, there was a massacre very early on.
Oh dear.
The 1830s. So, you know, it's a difficult history, but we're willing and able to work with all sorts of people, and we're trying to build that up. Yeah. So we do have an Indigenous people's garden as well.
Yeah. Fantastic.
Fantastic. Well, it's very heartwarming. It's such a community-generated garden that's serving every aspect of the community here, and not requiring huge amounts of water. None.
No. So maybe Melbourne Water shouldn't hear this, but we do pump from the lake occasionally. So new plantings and things, we might water for the first summer and even the second summer. The bush foods garden, because it's got stuff from Queensland and things, that would be one area that gets a little bit more. And the sensory garden is up near the depot, and so we've got a water tap nearby, so that gets a bit, and it looks pretty good and lush. But effectively, once things are established, they've got to survive on this 450 millimetres of average Melton rainfall.
And that is basically winter spring oriented as well, isn't it? So you would get very little rain in the summer and autumn.
And then the last question, if this was just a flat paddock, did you do anything to the soil before you began planting? What was that process?
So it is a heavy clay soil, and unfortunately, with it being farmland and practices, it had lost this. Melton has this 30 centimetres of really good brown volcanic soil, which is loaded with goodies, but a lot of that's just blown off.
Oh dear.
We've got everything here. So some parts of the garden you find that, other parts you're just in the subsoil layer. So a lot of beds, some of the ones behind us, we've brought soil in, and it comes from the Becker's Marsh coal mine. So it's not the top layer, it's down a bit further, and that's worked really well in the West Australian gardens and other gardens that we've had.
So
and
you've
if
had
I
to
can get
prepare.
anything for free, we'll take that. Oh, seriously. We have been helped out by lots of businesses, groups, organisations, so they're really supporting what's happening.
So it's a proper community effort.
Yeah, and it's become a real sense of pride, and we just say to the Mayor, this is the premier tourist destination in Melton.
Yeah, well, of course it is.
Good on
Would
you.
it be anything less?
Well, I think many thanks for your time, John.
that's
Many
lovely.
thanks for having us. Stephen and I should go and wander now because I know some things have caught your eye. We
Oh,
should
yes.
go and explore. And I want to show everyone those amazing eucalypts down by the lake.
Yeah, they're beautiful.
And not give birth.
Yes, yes, preferably. All right,
Thank you,
let's
John.
go.
Lovely.
Thank you, John.
And thank you very much.
So Stephen, John tells us this was an old dam on the farm that was part of this land originally. But
Yes.
these trees,
Yes, river red gums.
Yes, what's
Eucalyptus camaldulensis.
Ah.
One of the first eucalypts to be identified by Western botanists.
really?
Yes, and it grows almost nationwide. So it's probably our most widely spread eucalyptus species in Australia. And in many parts, it grows into this wonderful gnarled form. In some areas, it's a much bigger, straighter looking tree, so it seems to vary quite a bit.
Yeah.
And they are just truly remarkable trees.
So how old do you think these are?
It could easily be a couple of 100 years old. They can live for a lot longer than that. I think some have been dated at 400 or 500 years old, and they can go on for years. And the interesting thing is they're called river red gums for a very good reason, because they nearly always grow in riverine areas, and they need an occasional flood to come through, which then helps to germinate seedlings and start the next batch. So if we don't get floods on some of our major rivers, because they're being dammed or the water's all been taken away and used for farming, etc., then you don't get the next generation of the river red gums coming along. So every 5, 10, 15 years, you need serious floods to go through to help that next generation start.
Well, I hope that there are new ones here. Of course, the irony is we are in a low rainfall area and it's raining.
Well, drizzling. It's hardly proper rain, but there you go.
Who'd have thought anyway? But this is such a beautiful part of the garden.
It's gorgeous. So it's a wonderful habitat. It attracts the ducks and water birds and gives a lovely spot for people to come and enjoy.
Yes. So maybe one of the most iconic Australian flowers, plants, trees is the Banksia.
Yes, and in fact we've got a beautiful Banksia ashbyi here behind us. And of course we all know that they were named after Sir Joseph Banks.
Yes.
And it was one of the early collections of plants that came from Australia back into Europe.
Now, I don't think Sir Joseph has been cancelled because he was actually quite a decent guy.
Yes, I think he's probably going to stick around.
Yeah, he was quite generous with people. He got lots of new botanists on various expeditions. I just recently read his biography. Interesting man.
Yes, yes, and a wealthy one at that too. So he was quite
helps,
philanthropic
doesn't it?
about
Doesn't it
things.
help?
So I'm glad he got such an iconic genus named after him. Although there's a little bit of kerfuffle going on at the moment,
Oh, goodness.
because the taxonomists have decided, in their wisdom, to include Dryandra into Banksia, and Celia Rossa, who painted all of the Banksias in Australia, is incensed because
She's got to get out and paint a whole lot more.
well, she can't really. It's beyond Celia to go out and paint anything more. But she doesn't believe Dryandra should be included in Banksia. One, because she can't paint the rest of them. And secondly, she thought she'd done the lot. And in fact, there's even Banksia rossii. So one was named after her.
Ah, well, she did paint them all at the time.
Yes, exactly.
Now, again, Banksia, basically across all of mainland and...
Yeah, there's some in Tassie
And
as well.
Tasmania.
So their Banksias are all over Australia, but their highest concentration and their widest diversity definitely is in Western Australia, where there's some of the most amazing Banksias to be seen.
And also, different elements of this are very sculptural. So the leaf is incredible. The spent flowers are also really sculptural.
Yeah, evil Banksia men.
Yes, but the flowers, just this bomb of orange. They're amazing.
High vis Banksia.
Yeah, I mean, and some Banksia flowers are massive or bright red.
Yeah.
I mean, there's such a variation.
Oh yeah, and of course they're loved by the pollinating birds and some of the little marsupial mice and things, the little honey possums and things.
Honey possum?
Yeah, in Western Australia, they're one of the major pollinators of some of the Banksia species.
Aha. Well, I think there's another iconic group of plants just beyond us we should go and look at.
Yes, why not? Well, from the sublime to the ridiculous, here we have a tiny little Banksia with the flowers sitting on the ground, which would tend to suggest it is pollinated by small marsupials because they can come running in and get the pollen from it. And wonderful hard leaves and these amazing coppery brown flowers on it down at ground level. So this is another one of the Western Australian Banksias, Banksia gardneri, and dare I say it could look good in anybody's garden. And you can also see with this plant that it is suckering, so you'll end up with quite a thicket of it, which would make it a lovely ground covering plant for a hot sunny aspect in the garden. So look at that wonderful sort of suckery pieces just starting.
Well, Stephen, I guess many people are familiar with Grevilleas. I mean, they're grown as exotics in Britain. People are trying to grow them, and in California. But this one is of much more unusual form, isn't it?
Yes, this is Gravila Magnifica, which comes from Western Australia, and it reflowers on these strange canes that come up through the plant.
Yeah.
So you've got these canes here, so if I was to cut those off, I wouldn't get next year's flowers because they form on the same cane again. And so they sit above the plant, above the main foliage area of the plant, obviously exposing themselves to the birds flying past.
You can see some honey eaters on it
now. So, you know, it's actually formed a growth pattern to lure its pollinators in. So, and it's really weird because if you look at the flowers closely, they're hot pink down inside, but the stamens and stamen tips where the pollen are sort of more in a mauve shade. So it's got this really weird colour combination.
Very beautiful.
And I'm blending in.
You are. Very well chosen. Now, if you're, I mean, these are used a lot in Western Australia in gardens. I remember them from my teens. It is a great plant for the back of a border because you do have this sort of green mound and then these spikes of amazing flowers. So it's really useful structurally.
Having said all of that though, as a garden plant it can be quite tricky because if it's on its own roots, it tends to be rather hard to grow. It needs a very sandy open soil, can't stand any sort of wet feet or whatever. But a lot of the growers now are grafting it onto Grevillea robusta, the big tree Grevillea.
Robusta for a reason.
Yeah, with its bright orange flowers and things on it. And it gives it a good strong root system. So we're now able to grow Magnifica and some of its ilk, because there are other Grevilleas in this group, in areas that wouldn't ordinarily be suitable because of the soil.
Now, there is another Grevillea over there I just want us to go and have a look at.
Yeah, why shouldn't we?
Why not?
We're here, we might as well.
So this was the Grevillea I spotted, the most amazing orange colour.
And it has that same sort of growth pattern where it sort of spurs its flowers up above its foliage, which means that the pollinators can get at it easily. And of course, visually, it works well as a garden plant as well. So this is Grevillea excelsia, and it has sort of fine, needly-like foliage on it. You'd almost sort of mistake it for some sort of pine tree or something were it not in bloom. And again, another one of the incredible Western Australian species of Grevillea.
But I mean, we're in a dry garden, a Mediterranean garden. But as you mentioned earlier, I mean, there are Banksias all across the country and Grevilleas. So, I mean, even in Melbourne, where I am, which is much more has a higher rainfall and not as hot, dry summers as here, there are Grevilleas that flourish in that environment.
Yeah, and there's alpine ones. I mean, you go up into the, in the sort of Mount Kosciuszko National Park and up through the Great Dividing Range, there's any number of Grevillea species that grow as subalpine plants as well. So the diversity is huge.
Amazing. Now this struck both of us as we were walking past, assuming it was an acacia.
And it isn't.
No.
It's yet another Grevillea. And it's again a Western Australian one. It's called Grevillea flexuosa. And it does have sort of flexuous sort of stems. It sort of goes in odd directions.
And it's prickly.
And it has a holly-like leaf. So it has a little bit of self-protection going on there, and it makes quite a large spreading bush, so it takes up quite a bit of space and would make a really good taller ground cover, I guess.
An amazing yellow flower and a great contrast with the leaf too.
And it hasn't got the long stameny bit sticking out, so I think that's why we mistook it to start with as an acacia, because it looks like it's got little balls of flowers, more like an acacia has.
Okay, well, we're distracted because the one I wanted to see is over there.
Let's go.
Well, Stephen, I guess no visit to a garden full of Australian plants is not complete without a wattle.
Well, of course, acacia is one of those things that, again, is an iconic genus in Australia. We've got hundreds of different species, from little dwarf ones up to quite massive trees. They do tend to do mainly yellow when it comes to flowers with acacias, but this Acacia glaucoptera is particularly pretty because it's low and moundy, would make a good garden plant, has nice little grey phyllodes which are attached to the stem, so it's got this almost I don't know, almost sort of artificial look about the foliage.
It's an amazing
really
structure.
weird.
And then where the flowers come out.
Yeah, and the flowers sort of sit against the phyllodes because they're not really leaves. And then you've got this reddish new growth starting to form. And so the whole plant has textural qualities that I think are really good.
Yeah, it's raining.
It's raining in Melton. Yeah, so there you go.
Raining in the garden where it never rains. Hilarious.
So yes, I think that's quite a remarkable little shrub. And I could see it having great garden potential in the right climate.
It's absolutely beautiful.
Now, John, I have to say, I'm really pleased to visit this little tree because I remember you getting this tree from me, what, 3-4 years ago?
Well, try 2017.
Oh, really?
Yes.
That far back? Oh, God. All right, well, that's when it was. Right, this is the golden oak of Cyprus, or Quercus alnifolia, which is on the endangered species list. It's called the golden oak because when you look underneath the leaves, they're golden yellow. And it is a charming little Mediterranean tree. And it's doing remarkably well here. Before you know it, you'll have acorns.
And this is one oak tree you can put in your back garden.
Yeah.
It's not going to tear up your house.
No, it's a small, neat, evergreen tree. And I don't know, maybe it's a snob in me, but it's always fun to have something in your garden that nobody else has got and is potentially endangered in the wild. So I think
true.
My
It's
little
wonderful.
cypress oak is doing beautifully, and I think that's fantastic.
John, we're in the Mediterranean garden. I did not know this is a Mediterranean tree.
Really? Well, I didn't until I planted it either, because I'd never heard of it.
I always thought they were Chinese. So what's the botanic name of this?
Cercis siliquastrum, or
Commonly
sort of.
known as...
The Judas tree.
Why?
I've got no idea. I presume Judas hung himself from it, but Mr. Ryan keeps telling me it wouldn't have been tall enough.
True. So there are then, I presume, two distinct types of Cercis. This Mediterranean, where's the other type from?
There is one from California or Central South America way. Yeah.
Now, how old is this plant?
This was planted probably about 2 foot high back in 2017.
Oh, so relatively slow growing.
Slow growing, but just spectacular. This morning, the bees were all over this plant.
Yeah, it is
Just
covered in
imagine.
bloom. I'm so surprised that there is a drought tolerant, a dry garden Cercis. Who knew? Well, you did.
Oh, I found that out.
All right,
We learn along the way.
on to the next. Stephen, what has caught your eye in the Melton Botanic Gardens?
Well, we're in spring,
Yes,
and this looks autumnal.
it does.
Yes, it's a South African tree, Combretum caffra.
And the leaves are coming off in my hand, Your
Well,
Honour.
exactly, because it has actually turned. So it's doing an autumnal thing, but it's in spring. So in the next few weeks, once all those leaves have shed, it'll have all its new shoots coming out. So it does autumn the other season. So how's that?
But it is so striking.
It is, it's a beautiful tree. It's obviously drought tolerant. It makes a good big bulky shrub and probably should be used more. So, but I'm not sure that there's many people selling Combretum in Australia. I've had it occasionally, I've had the odd one for sale, but it's a bit of a struggle at Mount Macedon. It's a bit cold up there for it, but it's obviously reveling in the Melton climate.
And
So
we're
there you go.
in the southern African garden, so we're surrounded by aloes.
Yeah.
I was going to say agaves, but they're South American.
Yeah, don't go down that path. Yeah, aloes, pelargoniums, cotyledons, all sorts of other succulents, and a bush willow,
And
which
a
is
bush willow. Well, it's fabulous. All right. Well, I think there's something over there we're going to go and look at next.
all right.
Stephen, Carsonias in the southern African garden.
Well, as they should be, because that's exactly where they come from.
Now, have we not done an epic on Carsonias?
We certainly have, and there's some lovely specimens around us here. But of course, we did that wonderful story on them at Rorama Nursery in Lara, which is actually not that far away.
No, and they're looking fabulous here.
Yes, exactly. And they're only young trees, but they're starting to really be telling in the garden now.
These are leaping out at me, Stephen.
Or well, as they should. Erica is a big genus of plants related to the rhododendrons and azaleas and all that other group, the blueberries, all those sorts of plants. And Erica has sort of evolved in ways in South Africa that are much more flamboyant than they have done in lots of other areas. So they've produced forms with extra large flowers, brightly coloured flowers. I mean, there's pinks, there's reds, there's yellows, there's a whole range of colours in them.
Stunning.
And they're all really fascinating, small to medium-sized shrubs. Some of them are surprisingly drought tolerant. You always think of ericas as being sort of moisture loving.
This is my thing. We're in a no-water garden, and here are these amazing plants, which I would have assumed are more of a Moorish, Scottish.
No, exactly.
thing.
So yes, no, they're not. And of course, they're mainly bird pollinated. So in South Africa, it would be the sunbirds. If they'd grown up in South America, it would have been the hummingbirds. And if they'd come native to Australia, they would have been our honey eaters. So bird pollinated plants with the long tubular flowers, and they flower for months.
Wow. Well, they are stunning.
Yes, so another group of fabulous plants here in the gardens.
There you go. Well, that was amazing. And of course, it is raining in Melton where it never rains.
Yes, exactly. And we're back where we started from with the Eucalyptus woodwardi.
And in a garden that doesn't get watered and it's raining. But anyway, you know, it rains in dry climates. Just
of course it does.
Often.
Yes, so we're back here again.
On the day that we're here.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, well, I'm getting damp, but that's all right.
You are. Well, it's been wonderful to take a walk through the particular areas, the South African garden, the South American garden, which in fact we didn't really go in much, but forgive us. The Australian beds. It is an amazing place. So if you're traveling about in country Victoria, do come and have a look at the Melton Botanic Gardens. We'll put the link below. And I have to say, there is a great plant shop.
Oh dear. Yes, they have their own nursery where they sell plants to raise funds for the gardens. So
I'm not going home empty-handed.
Yeah, well, I don't blame you, and it's a very good way of not only raising some funds for the gardens, but raising people's awareness of some of the plants that we do grow in this country.
There are some really amazing things. So many thanks to John and the team here at Melton for having us. And if you want to know what we're doing next week, do hit subscribe because we post every Friday.
Yes, and don't forget, if you've got a burning question you need to ask me, pop it in the comments below and we will deal with it hopefully within 60 seconds on our Monday shorts.
We do, but until then, we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye all.